morning. Who's ready for the second panel? All right. This is positioned to be a great panel. We have a wonderful panel of esteemed CEOs and founders. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it off to our moderator. Aisha, take it away.
Hi, good morning everyone, and welcome to the seventh annual C-Lab conference in South Florida. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Aisha Alves. I work for FlowerHire. I'm an executive cannabis recruiter, and I cover everything, but I do live here in South Florida, so welcome to my hood, and thank you for coming to this conversation. We are going to be speaking today with some of the top CEOs in cannabis, a view from the top, the CEO's vision for 2025. Today, we have with us Gary Santo, who is CEO of RX Green Technologies, Brady Cobb, CEO and founder of Sunburn Cannabis, Caleb Counts, CEO of Connected Cannabis, and last but not least, Robert Beasley of FLUENT Cannabis. Let's give him a round of applause. For taking time out of their busy travel schedules. Well, I think all of us can say the same. I know it's conference season is in full swing, so we really appreciate everyone being here. Gentlemen, the last time we were all together was actually 2 years ago at this same conference. Were you guys here 2 years ago when we saw them last year? Well, 2 years. Now, a lot has happened since then. Whether we're talking about, everything that's happened in the industry, whether it is the developments around rescheduling, whether we're talking about the kind of limitations that we've seen in the investment space, or whether we're talking about the constriction of the cannabis industry in general that we've seen over the last 24 months. While all of that is happening, we're also seeing new markets open up all the time. So what I'd like to hear from you is, since we were last together, what's been going on with you? What's been going on with your companies? Give us the update. And I'm going to go ahead and start with you, Gary.
Sure, so I switched companies. I was with Tilt, and we had created differences regarding wanting to succeed. And I opted to ultimately leave and was trying to figure out, do I stay on the plant touching side or not? And with everything that's been going on, and even with the potential for rescheduling, I think COGS are going to start becoming a lot more important to people. Right now it's great to have big COGS because that's your only deduction. But when you start really caring about what it's going to cost you to produce that gram or that milliliter, I went to the ancillary side, and I figured the easiest place to start is in the beginning. Everything that gets made has to start with the plant, has to be grown in the substrate, has to be fed something. So I switched over to the ancillary side and tried to bring an operator's viewpoint to that.
Are you telling me that you had to pivot in cannabis?
Yeah, despite everything sounding the same year after year, you still have to pivot every now and then.
Thanks.
Yeah, so it's been quite the ride. I think we had just started our journey as Sunburn Cannabis after closing the MedMen acquisition when I was on this stage a couple of years ago. We've since grown. We're at 14 stores, going to 17 by the end of the year. Then we were 1 grow. We are now 3 grows plus 2 labs. I think we're probably about 100 employees in. We're about just under 400 now. So it's been quite the ride. The thing that keenly focused on, and it's a pleasure to be up here with these gentlemen. I've been a fan of Connected for quite some time, and I've always kind of taken that same mindset of lead with flower. Our big saying in our company is farm first. Everything starts and ends at the farm. So ultimately, we've been able to do that, but we turned our eyes to the P&L and the balance sheet too, and we're able to achieve free cash flow, which gives you maximum optionality, especially ahead of this catalyst event. So it was really a focus on being disciplined for a lot of the reasons that he described as well, Gary described as well, is that it's a tough business. And to kind of be able to maintain that focus on legacy and maintain that focus on quality while also steering the ship towards and achieving that free cash flow gives us the ability to be ready for the moment when it happens. So it's a constant fight and a constant pivot to maintain authenticity while also bringing your P&L and balance sheet and start studying the industry and the contraction that you mentioned. You can get into trouble quick. So that's been the primary focus.
Well, and I'll make a comment here. I think with all of that being said, it's been really, it's been great to see what you guys have been doing in the past 2 years as being such a Florida homegrown brand and the success you've had. So congrats to you and the team.
Thank you.
Caleb.
So 2 years ago, we hadn't quite yet launched in Florida. We launched in December 2 years back. And so a lot's changed for us since then. We've been selling in the True Leave locations, 8 connected and alien labs, and we've really liked what the Florida market has had to offer. And it proved that California brands have recognition and consumer draw coast to coast, right? And that was one of the things we knew we had to prove. We've been in California since 2009. We've been in Arizona since 2019. And you know, we had to prove that California brands mean something wherever they go, and that their draw will bring in a different consumer base. And that's what True Leave was looking for when they brought us in under their umbrella, and that's proved out to be true. Over 30% of new customers coming into True Leave locations are buying connected or alien labs. So I think that's a testament to what California culture means to the industry, what it means regardless of where you're growing, regardless of the regulatory framework, right? We're in, you know, it's been adult use in California and Arizona for quite some time. Florida obviously still a medical market, and premium quality cannabis with a story behind it, a story of authenticity, a story rooted in the culture of you know, what this industry was built on. So we're really excited of what's happened over the past 2 years. Adult use is something we're looking forward to, but you know, whether it passes or not, I think it has significant meaning either way, and we're prepared and excited. Of course, we're looking forward to a pass on 3, and what that might mean for bringing in more competition, and that might sound weird, you know, to hear someone currently operating in a market looking forward to other competition. You have to look forward to it because it's a reality. It's going to come, but more competition means more opportunity, more optionality for the consumer, which ultimately means the industry is moving forward. So we're excited for that.
Iron sharpens iron too.
There you go.
Robert.
Yeah, so I remember 2 years ago when Brady and I were on this, and Gary, and you know, we weren't a startup, but we were a restart. You know, FLUENT represents a 1.0 cannabis company that kind of did everything wrong, fell flat in the beginning, and then we had to rise up out of the ashes. And that growth curve was spectacular. It was a lot of hard work and a little bit of luck, which is always the way it happens. And you know, I go back to what Caleb just said. What we've watched happen in this market has been pretty interesting because, you know, we don't really compete. We just kind of survive together. And I have to thank Florida, now that we're in other markets, thank Florida for just being so difficult to be fully integrated with no relief valves, no other exits, no other inputs, and just to have to really grind it out. And so doing it in Florida the way we've had to grow, the way these guys have had to grow, it really sharpens you up for other markets that have other outlets and other relief. So we grew pretty significantly up to number 6 in Florida. We had kind of reached the apex of our ascendancy in Florida. There was no capital available. There, you know, couldn't sell these stock because of the price, and just, you know, typical cannabis problems. And so we decided to reach out and expand into other markets. And so we did that. We started hunting other markets and other companies that were similarly situated to FLUENT back in the day, because we knew what that looked like. And so our big news is, of course, we've acquired a New York entity, a RO there, and so we're one of 5 now, I believe. I think they're going to let on a couple more. And so we're now taking our Florida knowledge and having done it the hard way and going into New York, and it's been fun because these markets develop, and they kind of now started to develop on the same kind of bell curve a little bit when you look at it. And what these guys just said a minute ago, Florida's ahead now in a lot of ways, and the ways that it's ahead is in quality. I mean, the quality that these guys are bringing to the market, we have to race to compete with it. And you know, we didn't used to have to, because it wasn't there, and we could idle along and focus on other things. But when you get these companies that are producing high top quality, consumers' expectations increase, and that's good for the consumer. And then the availability of product increases, which is ultimately supply and demand is good for the consumer. So we just got to get tight. We've got to get lean, and we've got to stay competitive, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing for all of us.
And I love that you guys are talking about the increase of competition being a good thing, being a motivator for really driving the business. I think that the concept around Florida cannabis is that no one wants to compete, but it's the opposite. I mean, we're hearing it straight from the top, that's really what's going to drive us forward. Now, with this in mind, when we announced that we were going to do this panel again, And you know how we do. We post it on LinkedIn and everyone knows what they're going to expect. The internet trolls and their infinite helpfulness. We're very quick to say, well, how come there's no legacy people on there? Well, why are again, we're only giving power.
These guys.
And we're giving, right? So, that being said, being that we've got 4 CEOs here who come from totally different sides of the business, different histories, different origin stories, how do you, as leaders, create a culture that is respectful of both the, and I don't want to say it like this, but the suits and the legacy folks, not to pit you guys against each other, but there was a reality, right? There was this dichotomy of cultures. How do you do it? Or is that even, do you see that as a priority for you as a CEO? Is that part of your job? I'm going to kick it off to you, Brady.
Absolutely. And it's been, for me, a guiding principle from day one. And it's not an easy riddle to solve. But if you go, if you're in my grow, if we could be transported to our grow right now, you'd meet all of my grow team, and most of them, if your grower says that they've been growing in only legal markets, they haven't been doing it long enough. Anybody that's done this at any kind of real level has had to do it in the shadows, just like my father, just like anybody in California in the early days. Florida's had, that's the other thing too. It is exciting for me to see the California brands come east. One of the big reasons we were successful in our start at one plant was my partnership with Northern Emeralds and Cody, who I know you guys know. So that west to east really does work. There's so much history and culture there. The other part of it is Florida has its own unique culture and love story with cannabis. It's kind of interwoven in our fabric. It's the skyline of South Florida was largely financed on narcotics. We have our, the West Coast. We have our own affinity too, and seeing those two get merged together and be able to compete with one another, for me, is awesome. But as far as maintaining legacy in the company, it's paramount. That's why we're farm first. When I say farm first, I mean you're only as good as your people. You can build the most beautiful indoor grow, spend $1,000 a foot, and it's perfect. But if you have the wrong people there that aren't about the plant and aren't there for the right reasons, you're going to be a mid-factory really quick. So for me, it starts and ends at the farm. And we've always focused on prioritizing legacy and honoring the plant. You see in a lot of our media, as well as with our people and how we finish. We're still hand trimming 75% of our flower, which is that's just the way you do it. We don't auto pack anything. We're still washing hash the right way. We're making old school hash. So a lot of it, a way that I've found to do it is to empower people at the farm to do it the right way. And I think that's a really weird thing to have to say out loud, because sometimes if corporate gets too involved, there's too many SOPs and checklists, and some plants need to go 65 days. Some plants can be pulled at 58 days. Hash needs to be made the right way. It needs to cure long enough. So you need to harvest it the correct way to preserve the trichome. So commercialization is key, and it's just a constant balancing act between commercialization and remaining focused on authenticity and kind of honoring legacy. And if you can figure out how to make that work, and trust me, there's knockdown dragouts in our home office between our corporate finance team and our commercialization team and me and the farm, saying, I don't win them all, but there's certain key ones you got to make sure you win, otherwise you can get astray pretty quickly.
I think, I came into the industry in 2019, certainly more from the finance side, so I guess the suit, from that perspective. But when I met up with the legacy folks, the fact that they were able to build their businesses in the shadows without access to banking, without a good distribution network, they cared about the product, they cared about the consumer. Sound familiar? And you look at everyone who's failed, it's because they didn't care about any of those things. You had all these guys rushing in with money, playing a momentum. We're going to build these massive facilities bigger than we need because someday it's going to be legalized and we're all going to cash in. This is an emerging market. So first you have to find the need, then fill the need, then fill it efficiently, and then grow with the need. And it's great now, 2 years later, to be hearing everybody talking about, I'm not going to build a 100,000 square foot facility. I'm going to start with maybe 10 grow rooms, and I'm going to light up half of those. Let me see where it goes, and I'll light up the other half. I'll actually have a production facility. I'll think about dry curing on the branch. All of those things. So if you came in with the money and you didn't listen to those folks, now can they occasionally go off the rails and start like a program where it gets really hung up on details? Sometimes you can help, but you can bring scale, you can bring finance, and you can bring a little bit of corporate knowledge in to what is an emerging industry, not run right over it. And I think that's what we've all learned over time.
Yeah.
So we've had sort of the inverse problem that I think a lot of other folks have had, right? So we come from legacy. I started selling weed when I was 12 years old, and only took a small break when I took a corporate job working for a home builder. And luckily I did have that experience, because I realized, after I was done with that and embarked on my mission into legal cannabis, that you needed that blend, right? You can't just be a legacy operator with a legacy mindset and we're just gonna continue to blaze trails how we've always done it. Gets you in trouble real fast, and it puts you in situations that you can't really get out of, right? You kind of corner yourself into this legacy position. So we've spent a lot of time trying to maintain a balance of legacy and professional, commercialized enterprise that we're operating. 3 states, everything that we do has to be similar. You have to, when you buy an eighth of biscotti in California, it has to be the same in Florida and in Arizona, and a lot of the legacy mindsets wouldn't have allowed that to happen. So we've had to professionalize throughout the organization, and there's a constant tension within our organization between that legacy, because we still have a ton of the people, a good chunk of people that have been there since day one, or that participated in the legacy market in one way, shape, or form. I'd say the biggest battle is between marketing and legal, right? The marketing folks have this legacy mindset, and the legal folks are like, you can't do that, you're gonna get us strung up. And then I'm in the middle whispering to marketing, come on, push it, you know? You can do it, twist them. But it's a constant balance that's gonna play out for a long time, and I think the true winners will find that perfect balance. And it has to be real. One thing that's what I found is incredibly unique about cannabis, the cannabis consumers can see through so much of the bullshit, especially in certain product categories. There's a lot of categories where they're just looking for the bullshit. They want, the flavored vapes, and that's all. You can't tell them there's anything and that's a beautiful product and have it. But anything that requires, a certain a craft or a skill that's been honed over the years, the consumers can see through it. And so the winners, I think, will find that balance. They'll be able to show, look, we're large, we're scale, we're professional. We can have conversations with anyone in a suit or whatever you like to wear to work. Yeah. But we can also get down in the way that we always have been. And that results in the highest quality product offered to the consumer. And a good response in the professional cannabis industry that continues to elevate every day.
Yeah, I think what you heard here is the right answer. It's balance. You can't be either, because legacy has a place and you can't ignore it. And we preserve legacy down at Brady said, in the cultivation side, and then over on the retail side. So those two have to reflect the legacy and embrace it. But in the middle, you have the words like Gary used, which are cogs and margins and all these other things, which are any industry and not particularly in cannabis. But then what Caleb said is very important, because he used the word scale, and that is the trick to cannabis, is scale. Because even at legacy and the legacy growers, they weren't able to, because they were in the dark, they weren't able to scale. And so what happens is the techniques and procedures and concepts of a true legacy grower on a smaller scale starts to fail as you start to get up in volume, and then you have to work really hard to preserve it. And Brady just mentioned that. They're still sticking to certain techniques. There are other more efficient, cost-efficient techniques out there, but keeping that legacy culture is important. So you have to adhere to it, even though it's probably not, from an industry point of view, the most efficient mechanism. It's the way that you preserve the quality. And so scaling through a legacy mindset is the trick. And then, we have people in the corporate office that aren't cannabis users. They're talking about widgets and units. These could be screwdrivers to them. And we need that input, because we have to be lean and efficient. It is very easy to make money in a new cannabis state, 0 to 3 years, because you're selling weed. But 3 to 5, now you got to tighten up. Now you got to pay attention to margins. Now you got to look at cogs. Now you actually have to be a business that also sells cannabis. And so the successful operators, you got 2 coming from one direction and 2 coming from the other direction, combining, and we're all saying the same thing. No matter how you got here, you've got to be in balance. You've got to respect both.
I think that was the big takeaway. We can finish now.
Yeah.
And shout out for marketing. I think they have the hardest jobs in cannabis, so thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. Don't forget poor legal either, because to his point, I'll approve some stuff to go out, and then legal calls. What the hell were you thinking? So they may not have the best job, but they probably have the most stressful. And I say that as a recovering lawyer, because I don't make it easy.
This is true. So speaking of laws, as we all know, this is the main event. We are on the cusp of major changes in Florida, be it adult use or at the very least an increasingly competitive market if these other licenses ever drop. What emerging opportunities do you see in the Florida cannabis market over the next few years with these changes, especially when it comes to new product offerings or new service offerings? How are we going to touch our consumers in a new way with these upcoming changes? And I'm going to take this back to you, Caleb.
So one word comes to mind when I think of the likely passing of Measure 3, and quite frankly, even if it doesn't pass, I think the same word applies, and it's pressure. There is going to be a significant amount of pressure brought down upon all the operators upon the passage, and in a good way, right? But it's going to be, the fire is lit, and it's not going to stop for a long time, and that pressure is going to be felt to pour CapEx in, to raise CapEx, first of all, to pour CapEx in and to try to match the demand that you foresee. And everyone's doing the same thing at the same time with different sized war chests, but they're going after the same consumer. And quite frankly, what we've realized in all of our years and all of our experience, like the cannabis consumer is pretty difficult to read and predict how they're going to respond and what they're going to look for. And when you're going from medical to AU, right, that's an entirely different consumer that is now coming in. And so your current product offering, your current path to success, that's all going to be switched up, right? And so you've got new consumers demanding new things. You've got new companies or brands that are going to be offering new products that you didn't think of, that you discounted and pushed to the side as something that you didn't see as necessary to offer. Next thing you know, that category is going to be the one skyrocketing. So but beyond the pressure creates opportunity. And that's where personally I've operated best. I'm a procrastinator in school my whole life. I waited until the night before, but that pressure applied to me created a condition that resulted in me getting through and passing, and oftentimes better than a B, which shocked myself. But that's like this, that's what's about to happen. So it's game on, and those that operate under pressure are going to be the ones that are going to see the forest through the trees, that are going to see the opportunities, that are not going to be, they're going to be focused on what's ahead of them and what their opportunities are, and not what the competitors are doing. That's a very easy trap to get into. It's something we saw in California. You're watching to the left, to the right. Next thing you know, you got a big rig stocked right in front of you, and you slam right into it. You pay attention to your own lane, you focus on that, and the sky's going to be the limit. I think Florida's rec market is going to be one of the most interesting and largest in the United States and in the world. And assuming the regulations, shape up and loosen up in a way that's similar to some of the other states, it's really going to be wild. And I think trying to pick a winner or a group of winners today is going to be near impossible. It's anyone's game, and we've seen it in California. We've seen long-standing, successful operators that had a certain field nailed down, and out of nowhere, someone comes, leaner, nimbler, learning from the mistakes that they made, and nipping at their heels, and sometimes eating their lunch. So it's going to be nothing short of. It's going to be like one of those crazy wildlife Instagrams, just like nature's metal. Yeah, it's just going to be just shredding left and right. It's going to be hard to predict, but we're excited for it and ready.
Do you think that there will be like an emergence of of course there will be like a Florida cannabis culture? What is that going to look like, and how is it going to be different from other markets?
I think you already have it.
What are the elements of it?
If you look at Florida's cannabis culture, look at how the market rose as quickly as it did under one of the most onerous regulatory regimes out there. No real branding whatsoever. White packaging, black containers, no ability to market or advertise in any real way without risking your social media profiles. No real way to engage in public-facing marketing anywhere. And look at the size of the market. I think it still is. It's a $2 billion market, plus or minus, today, which is the largest medical market out there. So I think our culture, this is a state, you got to look at the nature of the people that live here, why they come here, and why they visit here. This isn't like going to Illinois for a conference. This isn't going to Vegas for an event. People come here to do exactly what Jimmy Buffett built a $2 billion lifestyle band based on. Smoke weed, drink, and have a good time. So the culture of cannabis in Florida, that's who we are. And I'm born and raised here. My family's from here. Lived here my whole life. Grew up surfing my whole life. Smoked my first joint at 13 years old. Sold weed all through high school and college, which was unique that I just got to go back and teach a class at Florida State Law School, where I went to school, on selling weed, which was kind of a full circle moment for me.
That's a good gig.
But at the end of the day, I couldn't agree more with what Caleb said. We've engaged in kind of purposeful procrastination, is what I would say. And I've been doing that for a long time. I've sat on a lot of these panels with multi-state operators, and everyone was looking at me as the kid at the kids' table that hadn't gone and wasn't a multi-state operator. It's because I've been honing the craft in Florida. Because if you can win here, you can win anywhere. That's number one. And number two, I knew if and when Florida went, and it's why after selling the last one to Cresco and getting out, and I decided to be dumb enough and a masochist enough to come back in, is I believe this moment would happen at some point, whether it's 24, 28, whatever it is, we're gonna get it at some point. And if you know how to win in the state, you can win. It's gonna create a lot of pressure though. And the one thing I've always been counseled on as people that I look up to, the mentors that have scaled successfully in other industries and or in cannabis, is you never want to be the first person jumping off the boat on Normandy Beach. You're probably getting shot. And if you've studied cannabis at all, there's dead bodies all over the road today, as we sit here today. They're dying by the day. There's a press release a week, it feels like now, the next one going into receivership. And that was everybody that jumped in the industry and went and took out a ton of debt, raised a ton of really bad equity, all when everyone thought the Democratic Party and when Biden got elected was going to legalize cannabis back in 2021, and then it didn't happen. And then you watch market caps go like this. So you got to learn from that. So Florida's going to be a big moment. It's the only real catalyst that's kind of certain that we'll know the day after the election. You know, rescheduling, we have a hearing, that's going to be a process. Our plan is to be fast followers. Not to his point, to keep honing our craft, focusing day-to-day execution, generating free cash flow, and then scale as you need. Because to his point, and I agree with it, the consumer that's going to be the rec consumer is different than our medical consumer. The rec consumer that's staying on a hotel or going on a cruise is not going to be buying a ton of flower or rosin. They're going to be buying different products. Because you can't go start ripping dabs in your Marriott without having someone call the front desk, especially after all these bullshit No on 3 ads about how bad the smell is. So someone's calling the front desk. So
you're speaking from experience, aren't you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it's a different consumer, so that's going to require different facilities. And if you just go build 1 million square feet of indoor at $1,000 a foot, you're not really going to be that optimized on that whole COG thing. So I've said a lot, but I very much agree. And we're studying California. I'm studying Arizona. We're in Maryland, studying Maryland on how it flipped and who won. Because the good news is we can study it and there's data. We're not the first state to go across the line. I've been involved in California and Colorado for 10 years, so I have the ability to see what worked and what didn't.
Now, go ahead, Gary.
I think the thing to remember here too, it's going to be a marathon, not a sprint.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I think we've seen that in just about every single state that's flipped over. And there are going to be some that are better positioned on day one, and that's okay. Don't chase them. Remember what your identity is first. Why is it that you're there? What are you bringing to the market? And don't suddenly pervert that into, I've got to quickly follow somebody because look what they're doing. Because what we found is a lot of those first movers, the first to market that claimed they had premium this and amazing that, they were just the first to market. And they confused the consumer at the end of the day, which is why you see prices doing this all over the place. So if you stay true to who you are and you just prep for it and realize that there's a long-term play here, it's going to start interesting. And I think this is one of the markets that could sustain the boost that you see. A lot of times you see the medical market go to adult use and then it kind of jumps and then recedes to maybe 1.5 times. Here, because of the snowbirds, because of the tourist population, it's got a real shot to hold it and actually be truly additive. Just don't get caught up in that and go running after it. Stay true, slow and steady is going to win this thing.
We got to think about the number, because we have a lot of partners in the alcohol industry, and they're pretty well entrenched post their legalization in the 1930s. And one of the numbers I thought that was shocking about Florida is if you take tourists over the age of 21 on an annualized basis, as well as residents, you're looking at somewhere right around 115 to 118 million potential consumers. I don't know of a bigger market. And nobody, not even the hegemon in the market right now, which is TrueLeave, is going to be able to go service the needs of every one of those people. It's going to take a second for everybody. And it's going to take a second to dial this in for everyone. And if you're thinking about this as a service provider or someone on the volume of work that has to go into meeting that market from both in-house companies as well as our external service providers is only going to increase. You're talking about, I mean, what's that, 100x from where we are today? We're under 1 million patients. It's a little over 100x.
Yep. It's going to be like 100 extra people showing up at your kid's birthday party.
Yeah.
You're like, great.
Not enough pizza
I don't
and
have enough pizza.
bullshit plastic goodie bag to take home.
So beyond, if we're talking about catalysts to the business, beyond AU, Rob, you actually had recently a really great quote in the Forbes article about something else that you think is going to be the actual game changer from a financial standpoint.
And that's the rescheduling.
That's the rescheduling.
Yeah, so the rescheduling has a lot of goods and some bads. I think the bads are in the shadows, and we're yet to feel out how that's going to work for us and from an impact. And we can talk about dormant commerce clause and other aspects that I haven't talked about since law school. But but the good side is very obvious. You know, first of all, we become legitimate, and for the first time, you know, while the states have legitimized cannabis, you know, you're still running around in an illegal status. But what does that mean for us? Well, the big one that you hear about is 280E, and what that is, of course, everybody knows it's an IRS code section that says if you're an illegal enterprise, which we are, you have to report all your profits and pay taxes, but you don't get certain standard deductions that everyone else gets, and we just get the COGS deduction, which is why Gary mentioned that earlier, and so we stuff everything into COGS as best we can, but that's a very limited box. So all of a sudden, we can be a legitimate operating company with standard deductions, which means that, you know, we can invest more in our companies because those are deductible expenses. And that's the catch that no one realizes, is it doesn't make us more money, it allows us a greater investment potential of our own money. So that's big, and that's really big. And so then you have the access to capital markets. We are still not able to borrow. The question in Forbes actually was, how does the recent impact of the applicable federal rate impact us? And I said, it doesn't at all. Like we're not accessing that money. We're still over in, you know, family office and pawn shop loans. You know, the risk premium that's put on top of our money is so great. We're so far from the Fed rate that it's like we're putting it on credit cards. And so, you know, when your financing cost is so extreme and so limited, there's a lot of debt coming due in 25 and 26. We're racing for it ourselves, and others are. And so when you have this expansion industry in rapid expansion that needs money, and then a very little bit of capital available at a very high rate, it creates this, you know, situation that kind of stifles us all. That's a big pickup for us. And then of course the third one is traditional normal banking. There are some great green banks and state banks that have come up and evolved into this niche and have filled it, but we're still not able to access such important things like credit cards, credit card processing. You know, we mentioned alcohol earlier. You know, we fall in that cigarettes, alcohol type industry, retail side. Well, a lot of those things are put on credit card that aren't available to us. And so our average ticket price is limited to the dollar bills in your pocket. And it's just not the way the consumer world of America has been built. It's not the way we operate. And so we're sitting out there in a cash-only business. So those three elements all by themselves change our industry, completely change our industry, open us up. And it would be really convenient, to Brady's point, it would be really convenient if it happened in coincide with the amendment in Florida, because we need those things to be better equipped and to grow. All of these companies are going to be scrambling to get capital in here to meet the demand, but capital's not available, and it's very expensive when it is available. So it would be helpful to us if we could go to Bank of America and get a prime loan for our infrastructure. As opposed to paying 16% on it.
Yeah. So I wish I was able to be as optimistic about you know, Schedule 3 and its potential impact. I think you know, what we've seen already is a lot of people are already not counting for 280E, particularly in California. And so it just so happened that the announcement of Schedule 3 and people's, you know, belief that 280E would go away there was a cycle of downturn and compression, price compression within the retail networks. They were already taking that, and that's going to happen. There's going to be the operators that are just determined to race to the bottom, and as soon as 280E is clear in vision, like I said, I think in California at least, there's already 20-30% of the retailer operators are already factoring that it's gone. So I think once it happens, it's going to be like a blip on the screen, like there's extra profit, and then you're just going to see one competitor just take that. We saw it with cultivation tax went away in California. Within months, it was completely absorbed, so there was no positive impact remaining in the market. So I'm excited about what it means, and because it is progress and it is symbolic to where we need to go, but it stops really far from where we need to be. And I'm a little less optimistic that the impact's going to be as positive as we're all hoping for. But like Robert said, if those other things happen to come to fruition in a similar time frame, those will be the meaningful impacts. That's the triangle that needs to happen: the banking, the Schedule 3, and what was the third one?
Credit cards.
Amendment 3.
What?
Oh, yeah.
Your credit cards and whatnot. But a lot of people thought capital was going to become available at the mention of Schedule 3, and at each step, as it progressed and became more and more a reality, still no capital available, still debt rates in the high teens to mid-20s. So I'm certainly hopeful, but having been in this industry since 2009 and made multiple business decisions based upon what a politician promised was going to happen that didn't come to fruition, or when it finally did, it was so long and drawn out that the impact wasn't there. We've got to be prepared for the status quo, and I think that is a reality that we've got to be faced with. We'll have a couple new tools, but without U.S. public markets opening up, and there is some interesting things that I'm hearing about, NASDAQ listed companies being able to use their stock as currency to transact in the cannabis space, or to lend in the cannabis space, or get creative, and it's being allowed. That to me is the real, that'll be the real kicking off point to major change within this industry.
I mean, it comes down to you run a sound business or don't you, right? Because if this wave comes through, if you're running a bad business, if you haven't paid your taxes for 3 years, tax relief doesn't matter to you. It doesn't work. So I think Brady's cash flow positive. He's going to have banks beating down a door for his business once that's possible, once that's available to him, right? Robert's a sound operator, same on that level. He's focusing on the things that matter as you start to enter the mainstream. Because for a very long time, we've convinced ourselves that the rules of business don't apply to cannabis because, well, we're cannabis. We're agriculture, we're specialty retail, we're specialty manufacturing. Those have existed for years. There's a well-worn path to what brings people to invest in that and what makes those businesses successful. And now, if we're able to start to cross state lines eventually someday, if we don't all have to be vertical someday, if we can grow where it makes sense to grow, manufacture where it makes sense to manufacture, those are all good things. But if you're not running a good business, you're never going to get there. So pay attention to the bottom line, pay attention to whether or not it's a tight business. Don't just assume you become profitable the day after rescheduling occurs. It doesn't work that way.
I'm bearish too on rescheduling. And I say that as someone that's been in DC since 13 or 14, one of the early players up there when it was, me and Jim Hagerdorn from Scott's Miracle Grow were the two main cannabis folks up there. And at the end of the day, I don't count on the federal government. Rescheduling actually has a chance because it doesn't involve Congress. If it involves Congress, flush it. You can't. If it happens, great. If it doesn't, flush it because you can't count on it happening. And there's a whole list of companies that relied on safe banking. It's just I have been personally close to that bill. I helped draft it with Senator Gardner and have watched it just languish for political purposes. So at the end of the day, you got to build a business that's sound. 280E would be great, but at the end of the day, you got to engineer your business for the now. I mean, people are getting tax refunds on 280E stuff. I'd keep that money in a separate account in case they call up and say, hey, they want it back. Just remember, I say that from experience. My father went to prison for smuggling cannabis, and then somehow his accountant got him a tax rebate of some sort, and then 2 years later, the government called and wanted it back. So in my family, there's precedent to see that happen. So at the end of the day, you got to be a sound operator. to me, the biggest single thing we'll see is, I think, and you've seen, to your point, you've seen little rumblings of it. I mean, what Ben Cobbler and GTI just did in getting an FDIC insured bank to do a SOFR +3 loan with them, which is much closer to what a real bank loan would look like, and it's from an FDIC insured bank. That just happened. And it was $150 million. It wasn't like it was a little accordion facility. It's a real loan. That's a big deal. So you're seeing you're seeing companies maintain NASDAQ listings with U.S. plant touching operations. So there's little breadcrumbs on the ground that they're starting to turn and pay attention to it, but we are not in the safe zone yet.
Now, just bringing the conversation back to Florida briefly, and forgive me for asking this, Ja, forgive me for putting this out there, but what if AU does not pass in November? What are we going to do?
I think you're going to see, we built the business to be heads we win, tails we win. So if it passes, great, we'll be a fast follower. I'm not building additional cultivation as I sit here today. Because I've had to get this business to where it is, I've raised $84 million non-brokered myself. No down rounds. So to do that in this market and capital constricted has been the hardest thing I've ever done. I'm wearing a hat because I have a spot back here that I never had before after that process. And I've done another, we just refied our credit facility at SOFR +5 with AFC. So, refinanced another $35 million of debt. So at the end of the day, I'm going to be a fast follower. I think you're going to see a lot of carnage in Florida, though, because there are a lot of people spending a lot of money right now, companies-wise, as if it's already passed. And it's polling great. Politics is my background, knock on wood or whatever else you use, rub your rabbit's foot, whatever, do the rain dance. It's polling great, but if it doesn't happen, I think you're going to see Florida's medical market continue to lead as one of the leading markets. There's still plenty of money to be made. There's still a great growth trajectory, and you'll see it come back up again. But I think there's going to be a lot of dead bodies on the road because unfortunately, some people haven't been. Look, there'll be an advantage if it passes. Going out, there's an upside to spending the money right now. Don't get me wrong. I'm not advocating against that. I'm not taking a shot. Our business strategy, as it always been, has just been to wait to see if it happens, be disciplined, and I got plenty of time to scale.
So that's it. So we've been successful in this market. We continue to grow in this market. We are adjusted for this market. Now, if a big broad door opens up, and I mentioned the birthday party, that's great. But you can't speculate. And there's a third option that I'm actually more concerned about is that it passes, but that it doesn't go through an implementation step for 18 months to 24 months. There's a lot of our competitors that are betting it all, and they hope that on November 6th, 8, 10, they're selling recreational weed. And I don't see that reality.
There's also, and interesting you bring that up, there's also the chance that the legislature doesn't pass a bill to actually implement it properly.
I think that's more likely the case. So here's the thing. The constitutional amendment of any type is a workaround by the voters. If 60-something% of people in Florida really do want this and it does pass, it should have already been passed through the legislature. That's their job. They represent at least 60% of the people in Florida. And so because they're stuck and they can't move forward, you have to go this workaround through a constitutional amendment on a subject that really isn't constitutional amendment worthy, to be honest with you. So we already know that's going to go into that sausage factory. And we don't know what it's going to look like, but we know whatever happens, it's going to be very slow in its development. So we likewise, we have not added canopy at this time. We've done one thing. Our 5 new stores are located back in A markets because A markets are probably, we're talking about Orlando and Tampa and so forth. That's the only adjustment we have made because I believe the passing of it is the starting pistol to the starting line. And it's an 18-month journey, I think.
Which is crazy, by the way, because to get to the start, I agree with you, but to get to the starting line is $140, $150 million.
Yep.
And kudos to Trulieve for posting, mad respect for them posting almost every dollar of it to get to this point and taking most of the risk. But to your point, I said it the other day when I taught the class at FSU, the real fight, the bell gets rung on November 5th when we see the 7 o'clock release. If 7 o'clock release and we see how that's when the work truly begins because Caleb, what are your thoughts on this? Because you've been through a couple of these flips. The implementation part has not yet been something other than a mess in any state that I can think of.
Yeah, I mean, in California, it was different because you had a completely unregulated medical market that had to flip. So there was this time period where nothing was available, everyone was figuring it out. Luckily, we were one of the first, so we were in a really good situation. But the situation that I'm honestly more concerned about if it doesn't pass is very similar to what I think happened during COVID in California. We saw a massive influx of consumers, a ton of people, there was still some capital available, a ton of people, including ourselves, built out capacity in anticipation of trying to meet this need that we thought might be ongoing, and then it didn't, and then it stopped. And there's a massive oversupply in California. And so as an operator, I like the path that these guys are taking. And it's not, aggressively building out, but that doesn't mean that you're safe, because the fact that there is huge competitors building out in anticipation, if it doesn't happen, they're gonna have to do something. Obviously they can turn off some of that infrastructure, but a certain amount of it's been turned on, a certain amount of biomass will have been created, and there will likely be some organizations that make a decision, well, we've got all this, it makes more sense to start producing and really apply pressure to the other competitors from an oversupply standpoint. And that's when prices start circling the drain. I mean, we've seen pretty much almost a 50% decline in pricing since the end of COVID funds, essentially, and where we're at now in California. And it's oversupply, and California has the bullshit relief valve that sends shit all over the country because the regulators have their head up their ass. And Florida's not gonna have that. That's for damn sure. No. There's not a gram getting out. So oversupply has got to go through the market, which means there's going to be inevitable pain, significant pain if it doesn't pass. I'd argue that the Florida market's already oversupplied for its current. We're seeing significant upticks in promotional activity, and some people are crediting it, they're chalking it up to, oh, that's just people getting ready for rec. I don't think so. I think it's people growing more, getting better at what they're doing, getting more grams per square foot, trying new techniques, bringing in new brands and new products and applying competitive pressure. I think it has nothing to do, or very little to do, with the potential AU passing, because the soonest that comes online is mid next year anyways.
Yeah.
What you're seeing right now is what has happened in every other market, and if it doesn't pass, it's likely to continue to get worse.
Well, I think there's something that a lot of people aren't talking about, but there's going to be this weird period of time. So let's assume it passes in November, and then it's assumed the legislature actually does do a bill, and everything that, politically in Tallahassee, they actually do their jobs. And we're looking at a July 1 open date. There's going to be a fall off in the current medical market between, call it, March and July, where cards are not going to get renewed. You're not going to spend another $200 to renew your card when you know you're going to go in, load up get as much as you can, max your rec out, and wait for rec to start so that you don't have to renew that card anymore. So there's also, you got to be able to make it to rec. And we have to be able to sustain any price compression to actually get there, because I think you could see a softer Q2 of this year. And if you study other markets that have had implementation, look at the quarter before it, that when they go from medical to rec, you see a lot of the medical fade away because people are waiting for the ability to go get rec. So there's also engineering the business to be disciplined. That's the word we use in the office a lot, being financially disciplined enough to be able to sustain what could be not a big one, but there's going to be, you got to understand, for people, times are getting harder, things are getting more expensive. It's a reality. And $175 plus or minus recertification, when you know it's going rec in 45 to 60 days, is going to be, a lot of people are going to say, no thanks. And you've seen in the lead up, the patient number has gone from 1.5% to 2% month over month in new patient growth to 0.5 to 0.6. If you just pull the Omni report every week and look at the patient number and compare it week over week. So it's already slowed down in the back half of this year. And data from other states would suggest you're going to continue to see that patient number, which means we're all competing for the same 900,000, and you can either win on quality, win on brand, or just try to price it in the toilet and sell whatever you can. Those are kind of your three ways to move product. So completely agree on where you're going to see it. And that's what California has been something that I've studied. One of my good friends, Michael King, was one of the victims of that. He went and took a great couple 100,000 square feet of really high-end indoor grow in California, tried to expand it with a big IIPR loan and go to a much bigger number, and then it wasn't there.
Yep.
And IIPR now owns the grow.
And it's exactly what he just said. The patient growth is already slowing. And there's plenty of things to speculate on cannabis, and you want to speculate on the amendment and its implementation and so forth, that's fine, but you put your dollars on it, you're served to lose those dollars. You have to be prepared for today's market, and to Kayla's point, today's market, that will be tightening. We're still, this competition, we started the show with this, like this competition is good for the consumer. It's tough on us. We have to get leaner and leaner and leaner because we expect more price compression, more competition. Now, some of those who bet it all, you're going to see a lot of transactions about 24 months after, because there's some that probably can't sustain their bulk because they bet it all on rec. But most of us haven't. Most of us have said, we got to compete where we are today. If that comes, it'll be great. And guess what? When it comes, it'll be permanent. And so you don't have to be the first one. You can get there.
It'll still be there.
Yeah, it'll still be there. It'll still be there. You can grow to it.
Fast forward.
As we're just getting toward the end, I know there's a couple things that our audience wanted us to touch on. And so, the takeaway here is the MMTCs are waiting in anticipation. Consumers are starting to be in anticipation and changing their behaviors. Another group that is also waiting in great anticipation for this news? Ancillary operators. How many people in this room work for an ancillary business? There's a lot, okay? And including my good friend Gary here. As CEOs, what can you tell us, ancillary people, in terms of what is it that you need to see from us? How can we serve you better? How can we support you better? Because, that's why we're all here, right? It has to be beyond making your lives easier, because we all want to do that. But what are the other things? And you've been on both sides of the table.
Yeah, I've gone from answering that phone to ringing that phone up. And I think first is, what are you bringing as an ancillary provider? Is it a value add? And then the second thing is, what are you charging for that? Because if there's so many mediocre services being offered right now at ridiculous premium prices, and they price themselves out of the market over time, because if this does go to Schedule 3, if this ever does get legalized, you can have access to better systems and better processes at much cheaper rates. So you're kind of living off a carcass that's doomed to die at some point. You're in rented space. So I think take a look at your business and size it to what is a reasonable amount to be charging for your service. If you're providing a commodity, should you be making 60 or 70% margins? Hell no. Absolutely not. If you are and you think that's the way the world's supposed to work, you're probably one of those people who thinks cannabis is going to grow 40, 50% year over year forever. It doesn't last. It's a first mover advantage. So I think take a look. And I know we went through a whole repricing at RX Green. Half of our division has nothing to do with sales. It's just providing advisory services to growers with the hope that, hey, if you like what we're giving you, maybe you'll try our product. But we're not transactional. I used to be on the operations side, and the last thing I want to be is a transactional guy who just every time the phone rings, there's going to be an ask. Don't have an ask. Have a reason to have a conversation.
Yeah, I think the advice I would give, and I wasn't prepared for this question, but I'm going to say it anyway. Be honest about your capabilities and about what you do know and what you don't know. You're talking typically, especially someone like these guys, we've been here 7, 8 years now doing this as pioneers. We've been out there with pick and shovel and surveying the land and breaking it open, without really any support. And so kind of traveled that road and have eaten that dirt a little bit. So when you come in with your latest, greatest, whatever, you have capability boundaries, and just be honest about it. Just come in and go, look, here's what we can do for you. Here's what we haven't figured out yet. We need to learn from you so that we can learn together. Like, come on board in this frontier process and help break it open with us. If you were selling a pick or a shovel, you understand, but if you're selling a new thing that can help us, then it's going to have boundaries and limitations to it. And just go ahead and confess those right up front, because we're looking for it. Because we're making big shift decisions, big shift little rudder type things. And especially when you come into my grow, if you come into my grow with a new product, you don't get shelf space, because we've got to beta test that somewhere else, because that's a production facilities. It's not an R&D facility. And so I don't have space for you to try out and learn on. So come on in with your data, come on in and tell me what you have figured out, what you haven't figured out, where you're struggling, and let's partner up a little bit more, because you haven't figured it out. Whatever you're doing, you haven't figured it out. I know this because the industry you're serving hasn't figured it out. And so let's just start with honesty and openness about what you can and can't do, and start there, because we already know it and we're looking for it. So just let us know what it is.
Yeah, partner first, vendor second, in that order.
From my perspective, if you've got something cannabis specific in your company name or offering, I'm immediately suspect. And it's because, I've been in this industry before there was cannabis specific businesses. FlowerHire, you got a unique, you're different. A lot of value there. But seriously, I've been in before there was any cannabis specific, right? And people would get a cannabis operator on the phone and they'd have a little bit of confusion. And then as soon as they got through that confusion and figured it out, all they saw was dollar signs and looked at us as someone to get over on, because we had limited options. And we still, relatively speaking, we still have limited options. But I want to tell a little story about one of our landlords in California. He approached us early on. He's big in the commercial property business, and he said, I want to lease you one of my buildings. I'm like, okay, these guys are a dime a dozen. He wants $3 a square foot. He's like, no, 50 cents a square foot and 75 cents, and then it goes to $1. And that's market rates for commercial space in this area. And I said, why do you want that? He said, because I'm going out and I'm finding the best operators, and I want to do long-term business. Because I know all these guys asking for $2-3 a square foot, they're not going to be around, their leases are going to be in trouble. It's not a sustainable business. He is the biggest and most successful cannabis commercial property portfolio that I'm aware of, at least in California. He's got not one person in default, and he's set himself up to be in business in the cannabis space for the long term. And I would encourage, we're being faced with the pressure from competition, from outside forces, and an inflationary, market. Our prices are going down constantly. We need partners and vendors that understand the situation we're in and are looking to add value and looking to be with us for the long haul, not just looking to earn a quick buck. So look to build relationships, but don't look at us as a unique business with unique challenges. Look at us as an opportunity, an industry that is going to be here for a long time, and you build relationships with guys like us, who have been doing this for a long time, and you prove yourself early on. What I've found in cannabis is generally, we're pretty loyal folks, and we want to work with people that we know we can trust, because we got enough shit to worry about than someone we've just signed a contract with trying to pull a couple extra bucks out of our pocket. Happens every day. We're fed up with it. Offer the best possible price with the best possible service, and you're going to win, and everyone else is going to fall by the wayside.
These guys said it. I'm not going to belabor the point. For me, it's the other thing to focus on is scalability. Understand what we're facing. We're in a nascent market. We've got the deck stacked against us from a regulatory standpoint, from an access to capital standpoint, from, in Florida, from a wholesale opportunity standpoint. We need partners that can scale with us. We're a certain level of a business today. How can you help us get, as you think about what you can offer, how can you help us get from here to here and be a value add, to his point, not just an invoice and a payment? Because I can tell you the groups that I've done business with from pretty much day one. And it's because they saw what we were building. They were willing to take some level of entrepreneurial risk alongside of us. Not all of them often knew they were partners with us formally. But once you get deep enough in the relationship, all of a sudden, hey, you're a partner now. Welcome to the show.
And maybe a lender.
Yeah. Welcome to the show. So it's having that level of scalability, and I would say being able to look down the road and see where we're going and help us get there. In any way, that to me is the single biggest thing. That if you make it transactional, you're not going to be here very long.
And dependability, right? If you're in the supply chain, you got to have dependable, consistent quality every single time. Because if an end user is going to take one of your products and they don't know what they're going to get every time they open that thing up, that's a problem. If they don't know what your system uptime is or downtime is going to be, and they need it, and generally they're going to need it around the time you're having a downtime issue, right? It's just natural business sense, and see around that corner. If you're a provider, demand planning is not something that comes natural to a lot of folks, in this industry. So don't ask them when do they need the next truck. Start to work on how many plants you have, how many turns you do. Do the math for them. And call them up ahead of time and say, hey, I think you might be running light on cocoa. I think you might be running light on nutrients. What do you think? Right? The phone can be used to call people, not just answer. So I think from that perspective, it's just basic business. Partnership first.
Don't sell us something.
Advice.
Help us solve the problem.
Yep.
Lawyers lawyer fees.
We are in the fortunate position to be running up on time. We've had such a great conversation. Thank you so much.
It was awesome.
Good job.
Thank you so much for all
too.
your wisdom, your experience that you've brought to all of us today. You know, all eyes are going to be on Florida coming up next, so I know you have a lot of work ahead of you. Best of luck, job blessings for everything you guys are going to do. We're rooting for you. And they'll be here all day, so go, you know, accost them outside.